This is update for June 28, 2023, day 490 of the war. Also catch up for June 27. Just want to talk a little bit. There's not many news. First of all, I just want to give you a heads up, but want to discuss a little bit economy, and then I'm going to discuss that artillery shell, and then we're going to do quick walks through the front line. So first, in terms of the economy, let's actually talk a little bit about Russia. And so in Russia, Russian ruble is sliding slowly but surely relative to US dollar. Now it hit relatively new low, 86 Russian rubles per one US dollar. This is new low for Russian ruble since not the beginning of the war, because there was a significant devaluation, but then the screws were tightened by Russian central bank, and the Russian ruble strengthened to, I think it was like 50 something, mid 50s. I think it was like 56 or something like that. So as you can see, it went sort of long road from roughly 56 to 86, and it's not the end. Also, inflation is picking up in Russia, and as I mentioned before, there is a huge hole in the Russian state budget. And actually, Russian government already applied once windfall taxes on the business, which is going sort of back to this perception that Russia is some kind of conservative country that's standing on the principles of respecting law, private property, and so on. That's not the case. As you can see, windfall tax was just, well, we don't have enough. The logic was very simple. We don't have enough money in the state budget. We don't collect enough taxes because economic activity is down, and so we just gonna apply this windfall tax arbitrarily, and then we're gonna do it again whenever we feel like. And right now there are rumors that it's gonna be, they're gonna do it again, but Russian government officials responding to business, no, we're not gonna do it, but we're not excluding this sort of opportunity. So again, this is how it works. There's no sort of rhyme or logic to all of this. Just okay, we need money, we're gonna squeeze you for the money as we need. That's how it works. And then I want to compare this to official Russian statistics that's coming out of the Russian Statistics Office, which I think showed that industrial production increased something like 7.5% in May year on year. I think GDP was growing at like 5% and a change also year on year in May. So you see this rosy, wonderful picture that's coming from the Statistics Office. At the same time, if you really look from different angle where you cannot fudge the numbers, which is more cash-based numbers such as FX, foreign currency exchange rate, state revenues, tax collections, basically in Russia, they all showing completely different picture, and they show economic slump, not economic growth, and that's I think I don't think many understand that you can easily paint the picture with with the help of Statistics Office. It's just the person will just put different number in the computer, and you have whatever is needed to be shown to the outside world. So this is just sort of how it works. Also want to mention China. The profits of industrial manufacturers in China went down in like 12 point something percent year on year. This, I believe, was in May. I think year to date, basically January through May, the number is even worse, like 18.8% down the profits. This is obviously a very clear sign that this export-oriented Chinese model is not doing well. Let's put it this way. I'm not saying not surviving, but there's significant pressure, right? Like losing profits to the tune of almost 20% is not normal situation. It's definitely not normal, and economic situation in China is probably much worse than sort of what we can understand, because uh, the statistics is also fudged in China, and it's sort of known. But unfortunately, there's not much alternative data available. So, but even this data is pretty telling, I would say. Overall, there was data for the U.S. think Richmond area, Federal Reserve area manufacturing, it's in negative territory, which again shows that the overall manufacturing there in contraction. So again, as you can look and mentioned before, there were similar data points coming from different regions of the U.S., basically different Federal Reserve districts in the U.S., and they all were pretty much showing negative numbers for manufacturing. So again, this whole story narrative that's being pushed about some manufacturing renaissance in the U.S. it's not real. And sort of similar situation. I mean, I showed in Europe. There's nothing. There's sort of no um, no ray of light in Europe either. And just want to mention that central banks are definitely uh, you know set on keeping interest rates high, and that this at least this level of interest rates for a while. Uh, and I would say that they probably will go higher, even though there is clear indication in purchasing price inflation that it's definitely declining, and I think the interest rates are not. We're not going to see this, low teens, high single digits, but it's definitely going to be very sticky in there between like 4 to 5% area, and that's where it's going to be biggest problem for Western world to deal with that. By the way, even in Japan, which usually has deflation or close to zero inflation CPI was came like 3.2%, which is pretty much a miracle for Japan. There's nothing great about this, but it just uh, how to say pervasive this whole inflation or situation is, um, that it hits even country like Japan, and then the reason it is pervasive is again because of the very wrong economic policies that's being um, implemented throughout the West, and that's really the driver of it. And definitely and that really means energy policy and all others. All of this push of renewables, all other things that are being pushed through dictate that don't make economic sense. First of all, they all increase costs, and that translates into higher inflation and decrease in the standard of living throughout West, basically. I mean, the same is happening, obviously, Russia, China. They're not really immune either. In some ways, we obviously, it's the same planet. In the end, we're all in the one boat. So now let's switch a little bit different topic. I made a post about this artillery shells, and then there is a charge here, as you can see. This is circulating on Russian media, and basically, and this is being presented as direct supply from China. This is obviously not correct, and I think one of the viewers correctly pointed. So this is what is sort of the most likely scenario. What this is this is coming from Iran, maybe not directly. I don't know, maybe through Syria. The exact path is sort of unclear, but it's originates in Iran, and that's why you have this charge which is made in Iran, which is, I think it's 2018, fairly recent one. And then you have shell, and I think one of the viewers he pointed 1983. That's when it was made. So what this really probably means is that um, Iran is selling like sort of old stockpile of 152 millimeter shells from China, and they got it probably during they purchased it probably from China during the Iraq-Iran war, and probably they had a large stockpile haven't used and supplying to Russia right now. So again, so the shortage of artillery shells is real for Russia. I mean, it's real for Ukraine, real for the West. Don't know situation in China. I would assume probably better, just because they are really the manufacturing base of the world. Uh, but but that's sort of like answer to what it is. And again, I think the masks are being sort of taking off. It's going to be more and more clear, the sort of coordination between Iran, China, and Russia. I mean, with Iran, it's sort of straight in your face at this point. There is not even sort of any kind of ambiguity, I guess. No diplomacy. It's very straightforward. With China, it's still sort of going through sort of back roads, and probably in the future, this path may remain that China will supply to Pakistan. Oh, sorry, not Pakistan, to Iran, and potentially. Well, that's actually a good question. But so far, for sure, to Iran, and then it comes through Iran to Russia. With Pakistan is actually a very interesting situation because it's definitely China ally, and I'm not talking about like ordinary people how they feel, what they want. I'm talking about the political class that sort of rules Pakistan, and it's very clearly aligned with China, uh, and it's probably driven by India situation and so on, and it's being even pushed toward China even more stronger with the recent Indian Prime Minister visit to the U.S., where they look like they sort of made some comments that were not perceived well in Pakistan. So basically, Pakistan has been pushed even more towards China. At the same time, Pakistan is selling a lot of 155 millimeter shells to Ukraine. So as you can see, uh, it's not black and white world. There's a lot of gray where it's in the end it's all about, I guess, money for the most outside of Ukraine, because for Ukraine it's all about surviving as a country, as for the citizens. I'm not talking about Ukrainian uh, political talk, which I spoke many times. It's in my view absolutely corrupt, incompetent, and it's definitely. I'd say it doesn't help Ukraine. It actually pushes Ukraine in the wrong direction. But it is what it is. It's just reality right now for Ukraine. Now let's switch to the front line. Before I do that, in terms of Wagner Group, there is no real clear information what's going on. I think it's still sort of not being resolved. It's still being sort of like fluid, the whole situation, what's going to happen, and so on. Um, but it does look more and more that Russia will lose Wagner Group, which was the most dangerous tool in its arsenal, which is net great for Ukraine. That's just how I look at this. Even if Russia doesn't lose them in terms of it's still nominal may exist, but it's just going to be shadow itself. It's definitely um, uh, gonna lose its sort of potential. And let's say if some smaller sort of pieces of it is going to get absorbed into other units, they will be just organizationally destroyed and turned into the Soviet army of typical Soviet army of Russian Soviet army and Ukrainian Soviet army, meaning like that they both Soviet armies, but obviously they're gonna go into the Russian Soviet army and turn into basically call it into dust there. So that's the whole point. And I just want to highlight one important thing, that this collision was very clear and obvious. And this is at the philosophical level. It's a collision between um, collectivism and individualism, between the sort of state power and private sort of interest, private understanding, private initiative. And this is when in Russia, private initiative, individualism never tolerated and always sort of destroyed, squished at any opportunity possible. And so that's why it was destroyed, this Wagner group, because this was example of private initiative, um, um, and sort of individualism in some way. Um, also want to mention a little bit about comments of the Russian president, which who said that um, that Wagner group, I think, got like I'm gonna say 1 billion US dollars from the Russian government. It's that number simply does not cover the expenses for Wagner group the way it used to be, and so this is definitely just a small um, percentage of the revenue that Wagner Group receives, and I would say it's not the main one. The main sort of help was from Russian government was heavy military equipment. That's something that Wagner Group obviously couldn't buy, and and if it were to buy, it would be insanely expensive. So that's the only thing that really where there was significant role of Russian government. But otherwise, that money that Russian government gave was essentially probably not probably, but didn't even cover like expenses for the pay and everything and so on. So again, this is how it works. This is how it always ends up in Russia in terms of the state and private initiative. It's always in the end gets destroyed by state, and that's why Russia never sort of moves forward. It's always sort of treading water, and that sort of nature was all of these problems there. Now let's switch to the front line. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough, starting from the north in a clockwise fashion. So the situation along the state border is uh, fairly quiet. I would say the quietest it's been since the escalation that we had at the beginning of June. It's not as quiet as it used to be, let's say, 3 months ago or 5 months ago, but it's at very low level. There's no indication of sort of new um, that there's something new happening or coming there. Now let's jump to North Luhansk front line. Things here also quiet. Uh, Tactical fights, really nothing is happening. It's essentially static situation with neither side is willing to move to do anything basically. So both sides are sort of happy here with where they are. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Things here are, I wouldn't say active, but really just sort of tactical fights. Let's capture, this point A or point B, which is like another 100 meters or another 200 meters. Essentially, this just a totally tactical fight, but so far it doesn't lead to anywhere. Sort of similar situation here. So the whole idea is Ukrainian side is pushing Russian side straight north and south of Bakhmut, and actually even there's new sort of area this near Kurdyumivka, and the Russian side is pushing Ukrainian side a little bit here north west of Bakhmut, but definitely Russian side is not advancing, and Ukrainian side is advancing like I don't know 100 meters in 3 4 5 days, which essentially nothing. And this is not the sort of this offensive where there is really strong forces are committed. This is just tactical fights to improve positioned a little bit. That's all it is. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here are, I'm definitely broken record. This is the same story here. Always Marinka, um, typically around something around Avdiivka. This time there is nothing. This Pisky salient, and then this Novomykhailivka. So essentially the same without really any advances. Total World War One in its worst um, incarnation, basically. Now let's move to Zaporizhzhia front line and let's see what's going on here. So, situation here in the eastern, on the eastern side is potentially may become, I wouldn't say dangerous, but such that Russian side may lose Staromayorsk, and if they lose Staromayorsk, then they by default they will also lose together with it Urozhain. So basically, these two villages. This is because now there is Ukrainian push from the flank to Staromayorsk, and there is sort of push down south to basically create sort of semi-encirclement here and basically force retreat of Russian troops from these two villages. This is not a major breakthrough. It just planned sort of retreat of the Russian side. Call it active defense. I mean, to extent it's active, but it's uh, so far the way it works, it's in Russian favor. So even though Russian side is retreating, but in some ways it's actually winning because it's winning time. It's draining Ukraine of its resources even more because this is super inefficient attacks from Ukrainian side, and Ukraine cannot afford in the war of attrition. Ukraine simply cannot afford this. So right now here locally, this in this Velika Novosilka area is essentially um, Pyrrhic victory for Ukraine to some extent. I wouldn't say totally, but it's definitely not the path that leads to clear victory. Let's put it this way. Um, Now, actually, let me go back. Situation here around the Rikhiv is more or less stable. There are some, basically tactical fights. Really, nothing of essence, nothing major is happening in this area. And now let's move a little bit to actually Dnipro area. This is where things actually potentially, as I said, more interesting. So Russian side basically attempted to eliminate this bridgeheads and cannot and actually lost significant, well, not huge, but it was painful losses for the Russian side in while they tried to eliminate these bridgeheads. And it's becoming very clear to Russian side they cannot do it. Just they don't have enough resources, and there are even rumors that basically some battalion or company size pieces are being pulled from these brigades here and being pulled to the Zaporizhzhia front line. So basically, things here are definitely not in Russian favor, and it does look like a weak point for the Russian side, where potentially Ukraine can get something here, some success. Overall, it's definitely not as, I'm not saying that this is easy, but relative to the other areas, this is looks more promising than anything else so far for Ukraine. But it's really at the very very early stage. This bridgehead's probably like 3 kilometer in length, and probably in depth it's about less than 1 kilometer, more like 600 meters, 500 meters in depth. So pretty much, still almost nothing. But the big point is that essentially Russian side cannot destroy them, and that's really creates opportunity to basically expand from those bridgeheads. Whether it's going to happen or not, that's another question. But that's the only sort of promising area overall that sort of remains, as I said before, because this is straight road towards Crimea and essentially to the rear of all of this Russian group here. So essentially, if you get here, you will force simply collapse because you're attacking all of these Russian troops from the rear. It's just going to be either panic or they will be forced to withdraw towards east, and so potentially it's there is opportunity there. That's all I can say at this point. Whether it's going to be realized or not, that's totally different question. Okay, thanks for watching. Until next time, bye bye.